Hello, people of the internet. It is me, Ben Gale, and I am here at approximately 6:40 in the morning, making this podcast for your enjoyment and for my English 3 grade, which I hope. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. I hope Mr. O'Teal will find pleasing. Anyway, let's get into this so it doesn't take too long. I try to make this as quick as possible. Okay. I am making this podcast about Lord of the Flies by William Golding. I would like to start off with the genre. This book is allegorical fiction, meaning those story essentially exists to teach a lesson. The characters and events embody complex emotions and themes. Everything basically represents something in this book. It's basically meant to teach. It's not really a book about just enjoying. It's not about an experience per se. It's about teaching a particular lesson. And we will get into what that particular lesson is in a moment. Another thing about this book is that it is also a piece of dystopian fiction. Essentially, you have a bunch of boys who survived a plane crash, and this is kind of William Golding's experiment on what would happen. How would boys actually act if you put them all on an island and there were no adults around? Well, this is basically his experiment about that, and the result is a dystopian society where the kids brutally oppress each other. As for structure and writing style, this book is written third person omniscient. That means we don't see it entirely from one character's perspective. We kind of jump around character to character and we know their thoughts and what they're thinking, but we're not seeing it from we're not limited to someone's perspective or what someone sees. We know what someone's seeing and what someone's thinking, but we're not limited to that in any way. We know what's going on. William Golding describes everything that's important, everything we need to know, but we're not limited to a character's perspective. So, thankfully, we don't have to worry about any unreliable narrators, unless you consider William Golding an unreliable narrator, but that's a topic for another day. He's also, I also want to mention that he likes to write in a very simple, matter-of-fact way. Like, he likes to describe events very, I guess say, in a way that kind of lacks emotion. Like, when he describes a kid that is crying, he kind of says a kid is crying. He's babbling and he's gibbering incoherently, and he kind of, it's like he kind of tries to distance the reader from the emotion of the situation. But this quickly changes whenever he starts talking about nature. He likes to discuss like anything natural in a very evocative way. Like when the trees brush together, he describes the sound as evil, because this is kind of relevant to whatever's happening in nature is kind of relevant to what's going on within the herd of man and how nature kind of is affecting the boy's primal inclination. So, yeah, whenever he starts discussing nature, he gets very descriptive. And next, I'd like to talk about the characters. First, we have a protagonist, Ralph. Ralph is sort of the personification of civilizing order. He's the oldest and biggest kid of the group. He is 12 years old, and he has blonde, and he has fair, and his hair described as fair. So right off at the beginning, he's described as a fair boy, and he kind of has this innate concept of justice and purpose. He fights to keep civilization together on the island. He's initially voted as the group's leader, but he is eventually He's eventually sort of abandoned when the kids abandon civilization. So when they abandon him, they abandon civilization. So you can see Ralph as pretty much the embodiment of civilizing order. Next, you have his best friend, Piggy. Everyone he kind of makes fun of Piggy a lot, but they're friends. Come on, he doesn't hate Piggy at all. But anyway, Piggy, you can kind of see Piggy as representing the civilizing the civilizing force of rational thinking and scientific inquiry. That's pretty much what he represents. He's a very you can probably tell just by his name that he's not very physically capable. He has asthma, he's overweight, he doesn't know how to swim, but he's very intelligent. So you can kind of compare him to like an intellectual. He's a very intellectual boy. You can kind of compare him to the intellectuals of society. They don't really do much physically, but they do a lot of thinking and they do a lot of teaching and lessons. They're wise. They're wise people, but they can't really do much on their own. So he kind of embodies a rational, scientific part of society. And next we have Jack. Jack is sort of the antagonist, but not really. He's more of like a tool for the antagonist. I'd say the antagonist is just the evil within man's hearts, and Jack is kind of just succumbing to that evil. So it's kind of hard to call him the antagonist, but at the same time, he's probably the biggest threat in the book. Anyway, he represents anarchy. He represents that savagery within the human heart. You know, the savagery that the potential to I guess the potential of evil within every human being, the capacity to act savagely, to act without thinking, and to act with only one's immediate desires in mind. And that's pretty much all Jack wants to do. He wants to hunt, he wants to kill, and he wants to dominate others. Initially in the book, he still has some civilizing principles, but the more we separate from civilization, the longer the books are isolated on that, the longer the boys are isolated on that island, the more and more they descend into savagery. So, yeah, Jack is kind of the embodiment of that descent into savagery. And then we have Simon. Simon sort of represents innate goodness, you know, innate morality. He's probably the only character that's truly good. I've heard some critics can compare him to a Christ-like figure just because he represents innate goodness and a connection with nature. You could sort of see him as sort of like the mystic outsiders of society. You know, he's an outsider. Other kids consider him weird, but at the same time, he has this sort of wisdom that no other boy has. And he sort of exists on the fringe of society, but he identifies a problem no other kid can see. He's probably the only kid who realizes that the beast that they're afraid of exists within their hearts. And he tries to warn the boys of this, but they kill him before he can give his message. You know, he essentially dies in an attempt to save the other boys. So, yeah, so Simon's innate goodness and sort of, even though Golden kind of connects attachment to nature as a descent into savagery, Simon is sort of the exception here. He has this connection with nature, but at the same time, he believes in morality. And then we have Roger, the antithesis of Simon. He's sort of a sociopath. You know, he has this desire just to hurt other kids. And he's a sadistic, cruel boy, and he represents the unrestrained evil that exists in the potential of man. You know, he's the potential of man to be evil. He's that evil force that, in the destruction of wisdom, you know, he kills Piggy in the novel by dislodging a boulder, which crushes Piggy and also crushes the conch shell. So he's sort of the he's sort of the evil hatred and violence within civilization that lead to the destruction of wisdom and the destruction of civilizing order. So, yep, that's Roger. And then we have Sam and Eric, which I would equate with the masses of society. You know, Sam and Eric, they are twin brothers, and they don't really do anything separately. They are civilized individuals who sort of submit to collective identity. You know, they're Sam and Eric. There's no Sam and Eric, they're just Sam and Eric. They do nothing independently, and they sort of succumb to mob mentality and the will of the group. They're not really individuals, they just exist as a group. And due to their lack of individuality and their lack of, and because they cannot act as individuals, they are sort of overwhelmed by the domineering of Jack's savagery and his will and the savage violence that has consumed the rest of the group, and they sort of succumb to the pressure of giving in to the group and giving in to their own savagery because the group wills it. I mean, they know it's wrong, but they cannot resist the group. And because of this, they are unable to resist Wodge's torture. And by the way, Wodge is a sadist, and he loves torturing kids. And they're unable to resist Wodge's torture and stand up for what is right, because they're too intimidated to act out of their own will. Next, we have themes. The biggest theme in this book is probably, well, the most prominent theme, rather, I wouldn't say it's the most important, is civilization versus savagery. Throughout the book, the boys sort of, there's just this constant conflict between, doing what is intelligent, getting us rescued so we can return to society, and just fighting to keep civilization alive on the island, fighting to stay true to our purpose here of keeping the fire going and getting rescued. But at the same time, you have kids like Jack who just want to hunt. They just want to satisfy their innate desires. And it is this conflict that leads to all the bloodshed in the book. It's the boys who want to be savage and accept their lives as savage on the island, and it is their conflict with the boys who want to keep the fire going and want to keep civilization alive that really, really makes this story. And another prominent theme, the whole reason William Golding wrote this book is loss of innocence, or grief over the loss of innocence. Golding once stated that the theme of this book was grief, sheer grief, 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 grief. And it's sort of a grief over the realization that man is not perfect, that man is capable of such unrestrained evil. And so this is kind of a sad book because it displays it's kind of like a loss of childhood in a way. As children, we typically read books where the characters are just squeaky clean, they're their morality is beyond reproach. But this book is basically a mockery of that. It's sort of just saying, hey, all of that is a lie. Every book you read as a kid, every book where the character's morally upstanding and just always does what is right, all of that is a lie. Man is not as perfect as he wants to be. There will always be people who are evil and people who are capable of descending into violence. Everyone is capable of violence and everyone is capable of evil. And we should feel nothing but grief over this sense of loss. And then we have the theme of the struggle to maintain society. This whole story is about Ralph and Piggy's struggle to maintain civilization on the island, whilst Jack's group is constantly fighting just to gather meat, to hunt, to get meat. But meanwhile, you have Ralph and Piggy who are the only ones working to get them saved. So, this whole book is just about their struggle against savagery, their struggle just to fight to maintain what little civilization they have. And then we have the inherent evil within man, or rather our proclivity towards evil. Basically, this book chose a bunch of children who are typically represented as squeaky clean and showed this whole book is just basically meant to show that anyone's capable of evil. He took a bunch of boys who were squeaky clean, who were completely innocent in the beginning, just had them do these evil, cruel things, just show them how even innocent schoolboys can descend into savages and just brutally kill each other. Can just go on, can just hunt each other. They can set things on fire. They can treat each other so terribly, and this is just basically the whole lesson the book is meant to prove, showing that, hey, anyone can be evil. Evil isn't just over there. Evil isn't somewhere else. We're not perfect human beings. Evil doesn't come from this outside force. Those people aren't the only evil people. No, evil is always with us, and it's something we always have to struggle with. And because evil is always with us and comes from us, it is something we need to be aware of. And next we have literary techniques such as symbolism, foreshadowing, and metaphor. I will go over symbolism first. First, we have the almighty conch. If you don't know what a conch shell is, also known as a sea horn. You can blow into it and it makes a horn-like sound. Basically, the conch is a powerful symbol of civilization, order, and governance, effectively acting as a vessel for political legitimacy. Basically, if you're at a meeting, you have the conch show, you're the only one who can speak. And because of this, it also represents democratic power. However, as the more and more the boys descend into savagery, they begin to add more and more conditions to the conch. Initially, they say that the conch doesn't apply to certain places, and next they're beginning to outright ignore the conch. This diminishes the conch's power until it basically has zero power at all. Civilization no longer has any effect on these boys. The concept of civilization is completely lost to them now. But this is perfectly embodied when it is crushed by Roger when he kills Piggy. I think it's fitting that the embodiment of rationalization and the embodiment of civilization both die at the same time. You have Roger, the embodiment of hatred, killing Piggy, the embodiment of rational thinking, and at the same time, the second Piggy dies, the conch shell is crushed. The symbol of civilization is destroyed at the same time rationality goes. So I just think it's really fitting that the second rationality dies, so does civilization. And evil and just sheer bloodlust is a thing that kills it. And then we have Piggy's glasses. Piggy's glasses essentially represents the power of science and intellectual endeavor in society. A power that is stolen by Jack, who is kind of the dictator of the island. It's basically a metaphor for how dictators use science to evil means. And then we have the signal fire. The signal fire is kind of represents the faith in civilization. If you look back in history, one of the most important events in human history is the discovery of fire. We always have this connection with fire and civilization. I mean, we have this Greek myth of Prometheus giving fire to mankind, and because of that, mankind developed civilization, and because of this very fitting symbolism, the signal fire represents faith in civilization, kind of the myth, kind of the mission of getting rescued and returning to the adult world, kind of the hope of society, and the hope of rescue and return to civilization. However, as you can probably guess, the more and more the kids kind of succumb to their own bestial urges, the less they care about society, and the more the fire is ignored. Eventually, the fire goes out, and the boys just become they just become completely evil and just start hunting and chanting, kill the pig, drink its blood, things like that. But however, the fire does get them rescued eventually, but it's not the fire of civilization; it's the fire of savagery. They set the entire island on fire in order to smoke out Ralph at the end of the book, and that alerts a boat's attention. So it was not civilization in the end that got them rescued; it was the evidence of their own evil. And then we have foreshadowing. Let's see if I can find my notes. Anyway, one thing that is foreshadowed throughout the book is the death of Piggy. At the beginning of the book, we see that he's very physically impaired. If anyone's gonna die on that island, it is Piggy, as asthma is probably the least conditioned to the situation. And at the same time, you have Jack that's obsessed with hunting pigs. He hates Piggy for being fat, and he's obsessed with hunting pigs. Does not take a genius to make that connection, and eventually, the savagery of Jack's group does eventually kill Piggy. So that is foreshadowed very early in the book. And then we have the death of Simon. Simon's death is kind of foreshadowing that he's an outsider and that he's the only good character in the group. Meanwhile, you have all these evil characters running around who are just succumbing to their own evil and don't want to listen to any morality. They don't want to listen to any rational thought. So it's fitting that all these evil boys kill the one embodiment of good morality on that island. And as for metaphors, I think I've already discussed fire, but you could also see the conch shell as metaphor for something that wards off evil. Like in Indian culture, it's kind of the conch shell is kind of a protection from chaos and disorder. So I guess you could consider. hmm, I mean, we've already discussed the death of Piggy as a metaphor for the evil of society, basically throwing away national thought, and thus down goes civilization. The second you throw rationalization out the window, civilization just cannot exist. And then when people succumb to their own hatred, their own evil, and they just throw rationality to the side, civilization quickly breaks down. So that is an important metaphor throughout the book. Anyway, I've been talking for almost 21 minutes, and I'm sure Mr. OT is gonna give me a long talk about why it took so long. But yep, I'm just glad I made this video. Goodbye. I will put my sources in the description.